Hello everyone, back to you in today's video, doing GWV Sunday Round Up. As always on a Sunday, we're going to get various things together and see what's happening. So we're going to start off with solar activity. We'll look at what's happening in the oceans, the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, all the things that we look at on a Sunday will be included, and we'll also have a look at the weather for next week's 10 days as well. At the very end of the video, I'll show you another long-range model for the winter. A couple of days ago, I showed you CFS V2 latest forecast from the CFS for the winter. I'll show you another model at the end of the video. So we're going to start off by looking at solar activity. Let's get on with the video. This is the solar disk on our side of the disk today from solarhound.net, and we are spotless today. In fact, we are having a bit of a run of spotlessness on the sun over the past few days, so we haven't got any sunspots on the solar disk today. This is the GWV Summer Season Daily Solar Activity Tracker from our friend James Ackrill, who has sent this through to us this morning, this very latest. So, as I said, having a run of spotlessness on the solar disk, on our side of the disk at the moment. A couple of weeks ago, did have a bit of a spike up in activity there, but very, very quickly that's dropped down, and now this is where we are right now with total absence of sunspots on the solar disk. It's been going on for a few days. It has been enough to begin to move the trend lines downwards as well. The trend lines are indicated by the thick pink, the thick green, and the thick red lines on this tracker. You can see, but when we have this spike up in sunspot numbers a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago, that was enough to begin to lift the trend lines upwards. Now the trend lines are all moving downwards once again. Essentially, we are just hovering around this sort of level with the trend lines, sometimes going underneath it, sometimes going above it, but we still haven't definitively dropped down into solar minimum yet. We will do so over the next 18 months or so, 12 to 18 months. So these trend lines will increasingly be moving downwards to that sort of level over the next 12 months or so. Be interesting how long this run of spotlessness goes on for. Of course, as we get closer to solar minimum, these days when we have no sunspots, they'll begin to become more common. They'll start to stretch out into weeks. By solar minimum, they'll start to stretch out into monthly periods without any sunspots. The reason we look at this is that there's a connection between low levels of solar activity, so no sunspots, and the chance of increased blocking over the North Pole. And this is particularly so in winter, and particularly so on our side of the pole, so on the Atlantic and Eurasian side of the North Pole. There's a connection, not really that well understood, probably between the way sunspot numbers interact with the jet stream coming across the Atlantic, but there is a connection between low levels of sunspots, solar minimum, and an increased risk of blocking, and consequently an increased risk of colder winters. So as we head off into solar minimum, the chance, no more than a chance, but the chance of colder winters begins to increase once again. Obviously, we'll be keeping you updated with solar activity over the next few weeks and months. Actually, we're going to have another Solar Sunday at some point through August, so watch out for that if you're interested in all of this solar activity stuff. So, looking at the oceans next, dealing with the Pacific Ocean. Now, we're beginning to warm up in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean up here. It has been quite cold up there in the northeastern Pacific Ocean up until a couple of weeks ago, but now it is beginning to warm up. Still the legacy of those cold sea surface temperature anomalies in that northeastern part of the Pacific Ocean, but it is beginning to lift up a little bit there with the temperatures. Down in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean, still no sign of El Niño. I think we can pretty much cancel El Nino now. I don't think we're going to have an El Nino event for the second half of this year into the autumn. Probably going to continue to be around ENSO neutral, although notice all of this cold that's gathering down here off the coast of Chile, these cold sea surface temperature anomalies. That's one of the things that I look for down there to tell you where things might be trending in the coming months. So when it gets warm down here, it can be a precursor to an El Nino. It's quite cold down there at the moment, and this actually looks more like a precursor towards a La Nina event, interestingly. So I'm not sure where things are going to go in the second half of this year. I suspect we will stay around ENSO neutral. I definitely can't see us going into an El Nino, and it's not totally impossible actually, but we might go a little bit towards La Nina, towards a cold event perhaps. Later on this year. I might have a little bit more about this on the blog actually, because I've not really got time to go into it in detail for this video, but it does look increasingly like we might go towards a weak cold event perhaps at the end of the year. And of course we'll have the next ENSO update on Saturday. That'll be next weekend. In terms of what's happening in the Atlantic Ocean, so it remains quite warm in the tropical part of the Atlantic Ocean. Further north it's quite cool, especially so to the south of Greenland, so no real changes are happening at the moment in the Atlantic Ocean. I want to just throw this in, not much to look at. This is the image of Siberia and Russia and Eurasia, essentially, from the National Sea Ice Centre. Just to show you that it's completely snow-free now. So all of the snow cover that we had clinging on across the north of Russia and Siberia has gone. Essentially, a few little white splodges there across mountainous areas. But essentially, we're snow-free now. And will remain so for the next month to 6 weeks. In September, we'll begin to get the first little white patches appearing, and eventually, as we go through September, October, November, all of this is going to fill up with snow. It's one of the things that we keep an eye on when we do winter updates on a weekly basis, see how quickly the snow line is advancing across Siberia and Russia. Eventually, the whole area, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles, will fill up with snow. And that all starts in September, but at the moment, completely snow-free across Russia and Siberia, away from those mountainous areas. This is the latest in terms of Arctic sea ice extent. We remain pretty much on a par with 2012. So the green dash line here is the death spiral year of 2012, when a huge amount of ice melted in the polar region. The blue line here is 2017 this year, and for a while, earlier in the year, it was actually well under 2012 in terms of Arctic sea ice extent. Now we are on a par, almost identical really, with that green dash line, and the question is, will we go into a death spiral with 2012 for 2017? Will we go down into the depths like that, or will we actually in the end depart from 2012 and not see as much ice melting, and do something rather like that? I suspect that is what's going to happen in the end, but you never rule anything out. We might go into a death spiral with 2012 again. I would suspect chances are we will probably not see as much ice melting as we did in 2012. Either way, it's going to be another big melt season. Of course, this is something that's been very common over the last 10 years. 2007 started all this off. The year when we had the summer floods also coincided with a huge amount of blocking over the North Pole, and that blocking through the summer of the 2007 caused a big melt season, and it's never really recovered. And I say 2012 at the moment is the worst year for Arctic sea ice extent. But even the years after that, whilst they haven't been as bad, they've never really recovered back to the long-term trend. I think 2013 was a little bit better, but other than that, been a bit grim over the past decade in terms of Arctic sea ice extent. Obviously, we'll keep you updated with that. This is the Arctic Oscillation Observed and Forecast chart. So the black line here tells us where we've been with the Arctic Oscillation. Red lines at the end tell us where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. Remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere. It's not driving anything, it just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. When the Arctic Oscillation is positive, it tells you got quite a bit of low pressure up over the pole, and consequently you'll normally be strengthening the westerlies, but also you will be strengthening the Azores High. And in summer, the Azores High is what gives us, or tends to give us, our hot and dry weather. When the Arctic Oscillation is negative, it tells you've got blocking over parts. So if we was to look at this in the summer of 2007, we would have had a lot of negativity of the Arctic Oscillation, because there was a lot of blocking over the North Pole in the summer of 2007 when we had all of those floods 10 years ago. So it's always the weather that's driving the index. It's not the other way around. The index isn't actually driving weather, it just tells you what weather is doing. This summer has generally, so far, been quite positive with the Arctic Oscillation. The black line here was a bit negative in the early part of June. That was really a throwback into the spring when it was we went through a period of quite extensive negativity. But through around the middle part of June, the Arctic Oscillation trended positive, and it's generally stayed positive throughout, sometimes going close to neutral. We're close to neutral at the moment, actually, but overall through this summer it looks like it's going to be a positive Arctic Oscillation summer. The GFS ensembles are forecasting things to stay generally around neutral, a little bit on the positive side of neutral perhaps, but overall not deviating too far. So a little bit of a reduction in the Arctic Oscillation compared to what we had earlier in the summer as we're heading off into August. That's that period just there, of course. But overall still a little bit on the positive side of neutral. Things look much more interesting in terms of the North Atlantic Oscillation, though. So again, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the North Pole. It isn't driving anything, it just tells you what the, in the Atlantic I should say, North Atlantic. Again, it isn't driving anything, it just tells you what the atmosphere is doing in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. So, as with the Arctic Oscillation, through most of this summer, we've been quite positive with the NAO. We started off back in June on the negative side, but through the middle part of June with the AO, we also saw the NAO picking up into positive territory. And through July, actually, we've gone very positive with the North Atlantic Oscillation. We're still positive, albeit at a lower level right now. I'm sure you'll notice, though, these red lines plunging, doing a plunge over the next week or so and going down into quite a negative territory, really, going down to -1 on the index. By the time you get into August, it looks like they are trying to recover. We are trying to recover the NAO a little bit, but even then, still generally on the negative side. As the Arctic Oscillation isn't trending negative, I'm not really sure what's driving this change in the NAO, other than we're probably seeing a reduction in the strength of the Azores High. Now, this is going to tie in with a more unsettled period. Up to this point in the summer, the Azores High has been quite strong. It's been ridging in a lot, and it's the main reason that for the south we've had quite a hot summer so far. I think the Azores High is showing signs of weakening, probably temporarily, but it is showing signs of weakening a little bit and possibly pulling back into the central part of the Atlantic, and that's probably tying in with the NAO going down into negative territory. So quite interesting that the two indexes, the AO and the NAO, are diverging a little bit at the moment. GFS ensembles for the next couple of weeks. These are temperature and precipitation ensembles, of course. So the red line here is a 30-year upper air temperature average, a bit cooler than average at the moment. You're going to see a gradual lift up in the temperatures over the week, but not getting to a hot level, just sort of rising to a warmish sort of level by the latter stages of the week. And it will be associated with low pressure as well. So, yes, temperatures will be lifting up a bit, but it's still going to be quite unsettled. And then into next weekend, actually, it turns a little bit cooler again. Early next week, perhaps lifting the temperatures up again before they cool off again. Actually, this looks quite zonal, to be honest. We call this a sine wave, where we have warm, cold, warmer sector, a colder sector, warmer sector, colder sector, warmer sector, etc. And it tends to be something that you see more in the autumn and the winter. You don't often see a zonal sine wave on these charts in this time here in summer, but that does look a little bit zonal, so it tells you it got warmer sectors and cooler sectors coming in. Overall, probably a little bit on the warm and average side, and actually for the early part of August, which is this period just here, possibly signs of something a little bit more definitively warmer coming through then, although there is quite a bit of scatter. It's a long way off, but maybe something more generally warmer over a more extended period, perhaps, as we get through into the early part of August. Precipitation, we keep regular rainfall spikes coming through. So it looks like it's going to be quite an unsettled period, especially so for the last week of July. I think the south will get some drier conditions at times. It's going to be a complete total washout. But it does look overall a little bit on the unsettled and changeable side. Temperature anomalies for the next week. This takes us from the 23rd of July to the 31st, the last day. Almost coming down a little bit on the cooler than average side, which perhaps is a little bit surprising. Given that ensemble graph. But there we go, a little bit cooler than average of the final week of July. The precipitation anomaly is a little bit on the wetter than average side as well. So you see we are in a more changeable, cooler, more unsettled, wetter pattern as we're ending what has up to now been quite a hot July. So we go through to the GFS model then, and this is how it's looking for Wednesday when we bring an area of low pressure in off the Atlantic. Quite a deep, almost autumnal looking low to the northwest of Scotland between Wednesday and Thursday. That's going to bring a lot of wet and windy weather, especially to the north and to the west of the country. By Friday, that low pressure sitting off the Outer Hebrides. It's at 990 millibars, maybe a little bit lower than that, actually, at its central pressure, which is quite unusually low for this time of year. Bringing in these westerly winds, they're quite strong winds up in the north. Don't rule out the chance of some summer gales for western parts of Scotland. And generally just breezy and showery, really, as we're going into the end of the week. Saturday tries to get a little bit of a build of pressure from the Azores high here across France. That's trying to bring some warmer air back into the south, but very quickly that's cut off again by low pressure rolling in over the top. So any little hints that we might try and lift the temperature up at the weekend, looks like they're very quickly snuffed out by more westerlies coming back in. We run through to the last day of July, and this is how it's looking. Again, trying to throw a ridge up from the Azores high, and that one perhaps comes to a little bit more substance as we get through to the early part of August. This takes us to day 10, which is Wednesday the 2nd of August. We're trying to pull up some hotter winds from the south. All looks very unstable though. There's still low pressure out to our west, and really quickly that low pressure cuts off any hotter winds that we try to get going from the south. Again, by Thursday the 3rd of August, we're back into a cooler westerly flow. So yes, we might get a couple of lift ups in the temperatures in the next week to 10 days, but overall it does look a fairly coolish, changeable period. ECWF looks like this. So again, wet and windy really around the middle part of the week, especially so for the northern and western part of the country, a little bit less so in the south and southeast. But Wednesday, Thursday does look particularly wet, windy, and quite unpleasant actually for Scotland, Northern Ireland, probably much of northern England too. To the end of the week, low pressure remains in control, so that's breezy and showery, quite cool as well. Saturday again tries to get this ridge going across France, trying to pull some hotter air back from the south, but again that's very quickly snuffed out as low pressure comes back in and cuts it off within 24 hours. Nevertheless, Saturday might be a warmer day down across the south and southeast. Watch out for that. But then go through to the end of July. This is the final day of July, Monday 31st of July, and low pressure's heading back in off the Atlantic again. That's how we finish up on day 10. Bit of a north-south split, so the north looks quite cool and showery. The south does look actually fairly warm as this ridge is building through France. There's the upper air temperature showing we are pulling some warmth back into the south on Wednesday the 2nd of August. But again, it's very unstable. We've got a cold front here that's heading south-eastwards, probably producing quite a lot of rain because of the contrast between the two air masses that we see there, the warm air to the south and the cooler air to the north. That's probably producing quite a lot of heavy rain. So very quickly, any warmth that we pull up at the start of August is cut off again by the Atlantic Ocean. Certainly no sign that we're going back to a heat wave this side of August anyway. What happens as you get into August, that is open to speculation. But up to the start of August, no sign of any particularly notably hot weather. And then finally, this is the Jamstech model. I promised you that I would show you another model for the winter. So this is the temperature forecast from Jamstech for the winter of 2017 2018. Very, very early days. I shouldn't really be showing you these models until September, but I know you do like to get a bit of a sneak peek. So it's looking colder than average from Jamstech. Much of northern and Central Europe is being predicted at the moment from the Jamstech model to have quite a substantially colder than average winter. I'm not a fan of this model at this sort of time scale. It does tend to be a little bit on the colder side, and what often happens with this model is that as you get closer to the season, it starts to warm up. So, as I shouldn't really be showing you this until September. It's a little bit cold biased. Interestingly, most of these long-range models, because they're also climate models, most of them are biased on the warmer side, but this one, it's always been the case with it really, it does tend to be a little bit biased on the colder side. So when you're talking about this sort of time scale away from a season, it does tend to look quite cold. I mean, as you get closer to it, it tends to, month by month, gradually start to warm things up. But at the moment, Jamstech is going for quite a significantly colder than average winter for much of northern Europe. British Isles is included. So that's it for GWV Sunday Roundup for today. Hope you found it interesting and informative as always. Let's say later on today we might do a little bit of a blog about what's happening in the Pacific Ocean in terms of ENSO. Some quite interesting developments taking place. I didn't have time to go into everything that's going on at the moment, but in any case there will be an ENSO update looking in depth in a video on Saturday when we will do our July 2017 ENSO update. Right, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.